Let's talk now about the role of the board chair.
The chairman of the library board has the crucial role of keeping the board meetings moving while still allowing sufficient time for all members to discuss the board's business and come to decisions on the issues they must decide.
Here's another discussion question. What can the board chair do to help make sure the board meetings are effective? Please pause the recording and discuss or think about this question before continuing.
The main thing the chairman should accomplish after having an agenda to follow is ensuring that the meeting always begins on time.
As long as a quorum is present at the stated meeting time, the president should call the meeting to order.
Then the chair is responsible for following the agenda as it's written and making sure each item is handled completely, motion, second, and vote, before moving on to the next item on the agenda.
After the second, but before the vote, the chair should ask whether there's any discussion. In my experience, the subject is usually thoroughly discussed before someone makes a motion.
The chair's job is to control the discussion and keep members from straying off the topic so that time isn't wasted with unrelated conversation.
Keeping the discussion on track is probably the hardest thing the chair does, but it's crucial to keep from wasting people's time.
The chair guides the discussion and makes sure every board member has a chance to contribute his or her ideas with no one member dominating. Then she must be able to bring the board back to the central issue to be decided when everyone has had a chance to be heard.
When discussion has died down, or at least discussion relevant to the topic at hand, the board chair calls for a vote. Voting can be done by show of hands, by voice, which usually means saying aye or nay, or in some situations possibly by a roll call. And here's a common mistake. Be sure not to just ask for those in favor, but also for those opposed. Sometimes we're asked whether the board president votes. The answer is yes. It's not always true of other groups, but on the library board, the president votes. It takes a majority of those present for a motion to pass, so if there's a tie vote, the motion fails.
It's important for all board members to vote. Every trustee's vote counts, and no one should feel pressured to vote with the majority if they disagree. Sometimes you hear about a public body of some kind which has violated the Open Meetings Act. Does that impact library boards? And if so, how?
Yes, it most definitely applies to library boards. The Kansas Open Meetings Act, or KOMA, declares it to be the policy of the state that meetings to transact governmental business are open to the public, and library boards, as a board of local government, must operate in compliance with KOMA.
According to Kansas statutes, there are only limited reasons a board of government can go into executive session. For library boards, there are only a few of these that apply: to discuss matters of personnel, consultation with an attorney for which attorney-client privilege would apply, and confidential data relating to acquisition of real property.
There has to be a motion to go into executive session. The motion must include the justification for closure, the subjects to be discussed, and the time and place the open meeting will resume. When the motion is passed, the public, if anyone is present, must leave. They can come back in at the stated time, and the board cannot proceed with the open meeting until that stated time.
Even executive sessions that are closed to the public have to first start out as open meetings. Then the board enters executive session by voting to do so and returns to an open meeting afterward. The only people who can attend an executive session of the library board are board members and people who will need to speak to the issue being discussed and are invited by the board, the director, and possibly an attorney. No one else may be invited to observe an executive session.
No minutes should be kept of executive sessions.
During executive session, only the topic that was stated as the reason for the executive session may be discussed, and no vote may be taken. To vote on a decision, the board must come out of executive session, reconvene in open session, and the vote must be taken and recorded in permanent minutes.
If the discussion is not over at the stated time, then the open meeting still resumes, and a second motion is needed to go back into executive session.
Here's a question to discuss. The board is discussing whether to give raises this year. Can that be discussed and decided on in an executive session? Please pause the recording and discuss or think about this question before continuing.
The answer is that no, this topic cannot be discussed in executive session. It's a financial matter for which the Kansas Open Meetings Act does not provide an exception. It's not a personnel matter under COMA. The personnel exception is meant to protect the privacy of individuals. Now, if you were instead to discuss the director's job performance, then it would fall under the personnel exception.
As we wrap up this discussion of effective library board meetings, are there any last-minute thoughts?
Keep in mind that the board speaks with one voice. Board members don't have authority as individuals, only as a group.
The Kansas Library Trustee Manual was written to help board members understand their role and to answer some of the questions that commonly arise about how boards are supposed to operate. There should be written copies of this manual in every Southeast Kansas public library. It is also available on the Regional Library System's website as shown here.
Thank you for attending this training on effective library board meetings. If you're a staff or board member of an SEK library, please remember that you can call or email us at any time for clarification on this or any other subject. Goodbye.